Yeah. So where did we stop in the last class? So we were talking about various different ways of configuring the beans. Now you saw three different approaches altogether to configure the beans, right? You people saw three different approaches here to configure the beans. What are the three different ways you can configure a bean? Yes, you've got three different ways to configure the beans. What are they? XML, annotations, and Java configuration space. Yes, Java-based configuration. Yeah, using this bean annotation and all, right? Yeah. So that is what we did in the last class. Now, these are the fundamental things which you need to know. In between, there are a few basic stuff, core module stuff. But while we implement this, or when we work with the other modules, we'll try to uh, learn them. Okay. Yes. When we work with other modules, we'll learn them. Okay. Yes. Directly in the applications itself, I'll show people how to work with them. Yes. Okay. Today, I'm going to talk about another module. What is it? Spring MVC. Spring MVC module. So Spring MVC is another module in Spring Framework. We have discussed about core module so far, and now you're aware of this dependency injection in the core module. What you have learned in the core module, you have learned how to configure the beans, how to work with the container, how to load the container, how to wire the beans, manual wiring, auto wiring, implicit bean discovery. We saw different ways to configure Spring Beans using annotations, XML. So now let's talk about Spring MVC. So what is the Spring MVC? Spring MVC is another module in Spring Framework, and it helps you people to work with Now, web applications. Yes, using Spring MVC, you'll find that you can develop web applications. I can say that is what we can do with Spring MVC. Now, Spring MVC is based on MVC design pattern. Spring MVC module is actually based on MVC design pattern. I can say yes. When I say MVC design pattern, so what does it mean? Yes. So is anyone familiar with MVC design pattern? Can you people talk about this MVC design pattern? Yes. MVC. What are we not telling? Yes. Yeah. You see, let, let's try to understand this. Spring MVC, it helps us in building flexible and loosely coupled web applications. The model view controller design pattern, it helps in separating the business logic, presentation logic, and navigation logic. Okay, so when we talk about web applications, yes, yeah, as part of that applications, you will be implementing business logic. You'll have navigation flow. Okay, you'll find that as part of processing the client's request, the request has to be moved from one component to another component. The request needs to be moved from one component to another component here. Yes. How will you move the request from one component to another component? Yes. So that is navigation logic we say, and you have business logic implementing some business rules, and presentation logic, which is used to render the response back to the client. Okay, rendering the response. That is presentation logic. Render the response back to the client here. Yes, that is what you have. You know, you'll find that in this model view controller architecture, if we develop a web application using this MVC pattern, you'll have three different types of components. The name itself indicates model, view, and controllers. So models are responsible for encapsulating the application data. Yes, you have application data in the model components, and you may have some business logic also in the model components. Okay, you may have some business logic in the model components. Yes. The views are the components which render the response data. The views are responsible for rendering the response data back to the client. That is the responsibility of the view components here. Okay, and you'll have and you see the view components with the help of model components, they'll render the response. With the help of model components, they'll be rendering the response, I can say. That is what happens here. Yes. And what about the controllers? Controllers are responsible for receiving the requests from the users and calling the backend services. And controllers, they are the main components which will supervise that incoming request, web client request, I can say. Earlier we have developed web applications, right, using plain servlets. So in that case, you see, the servlet was responsible for processing a web client's request, right? So here, even the controllers, they play the same role. So actually, in this design pattern, if you use servlet API, then servlets will be the controllers here. Okay. Here, you'll find that the Spring WebMVC framework is like, okay, many other MVC frameworks, they are request driven. So you'll find that here basically they are request driven. So when I say request driven, what does that mean? Request driven means Yeah, the application will start processing the request here. Okay, applications will start processing the request. When the client places a request. Okay, the request processing will be initiated when the client places a request, I can say. Yes, that is request driven. You know, in this request driven architecture, sorry, this is in this MVC, always your web applications will be request driven itself. You'll find that always the web applications are request driven itself. Yes. Okay. You'll find that in this MVC, you have a central servlet that dispatches requests to the controllers and offers other functionality that facilitates the development of web applications. Yes. You'll find that in this MVC, you'll have a central servlet. Yes. In Spring MVC, you've got a central servlet, so which will be responsible for, you know, intercepting the client's request. It will initiate the request processing when a client places a request. That's the reason why we say it is request driven, and it will dispatch the request to the controllers. Yes, it will dispatch the request here to the controllers and offers other functionality that facilitates the development of web applications. Yes. Okay. You see, Spring's dispatcher servlet, it does more than that. It is completely integrated with Spring IOC container. So this is one of the advantages. You see, we are using Spring framework, right? So you'll find that here, this container, sorry, this dispatcher servlet is completely integrated with your container. Yes, and that means we can avail the features of Spring framework also here. We will be able to avail the features of Spring framework. Yes. Okay. So dependency injection, you know, support from the IOC container to manage the beans, everything. Fine. Now let's do one thing here. First of all, I'm going to show you people this MVC flow, um, and then we'll discuss more of this. So I have a diagram. I'll use that presentation also. First, I'll show you this diagram, and then we'll go back to the presentation once again. You see, when a client places a request, you can check this diagram. So this diagram here, it explains that the request processing flow. So how a client's request is processed. How a client's request is processed. You have those details here if you can check that. You see, when a client, when I say a client, I mean a web client. It's a web application, now. So clients will be placing the request. So initially, the first servlet, first component which will intercept this request is dispatcher servlet. So dispatcher servlet is one of the predefined components which is provided by the Spring framework, I can say. Okay, dispatcher servlet is one of the predefined components here, I can say, and it is provided by the Spring MVC. So dispatcher servlet's responsibility is to intercept that incoming client's request. Okay, yes. You know, but dispatcher servlet, it won't process the request on its own. The dispatcher servlet will not process the request on its own. You will find that the dispatcher servlet will delegate the task of processing the request to the controllers. In Spring MVC, we got components called as controllers, which are responsible for processing the client's request. Okay, we got components here called as controllers, which are responsible for processing the client's request here. So what the dispatcher servlet does, it will take that request, incoming request, and it will forward it to the controller. But you know what here, the dispatcher servlet, to map that incoming request to the controller, okay, so which request has to be processed by which controller, to map that request to the controller and delegate the task of processing the request to the controller, you'll find that the dispatcher servlet here, it takes the help of handler mapper. You see what it does, whenever a client places a request, first of all, immediately this dispatcher servlet will read that action URL. It will read that action URL and simply it will refer it to that handler mapper. So what the handler mapper does here, you see, handler mapper will take that action URL and it will try to search the controller. It will return the details about the controller which can handle this which can handle this request, I can say. Okay, that is what the dispatcher servlet does. That is what the handler mapper does. The handler mapper will take the action URL and it returns the reference of the controller which can handle that incoming request. Okay, yes. So the dispatcher servlet will take that controller's reference from the handler mapper. Handler mapper, is it a predefined component? Yes. This handler mapper is also one of the Spring MVC components. Handler mapper is also one of the Spring MVC components here. So which is responsible for processing that incoming client's request, I can say. It is responsible for processing incoming client's request. Yes. Sorry. Responsible for mapping that client's request to appropriate controller. That is what it does. It will map the incoming request to the appropriate controller and provides that controller's reference to the dispatcher servlet. So that means here it helps the controller to understand which controller is supposed to process that client's request here by providing that controller's reference. That is what the responsibility of this handler mapper is. Okay. Now, you see, you'll find that here the dispatcher servlet will call that controller whose reference is provided by the handler mapper. and then it will pass the request information also to the controller. It will also pass the request information to the controller here. So controller, it will process the request. Once it is invoked, it will process the request with the help of the model components. It will process the request with the help of the model component, I can say. So model component, you see, it contains, it encapsulates business logic, or you'll have data or data access coordinate. You'll have data or data access coordinate. Yes, that is what you'll see in the model components, I can say. Yes. Okay. Now the controller, see, it is taking help of that model components to process that request. And once the controller is done processing the client's request, it returns, it has to return the response data, which has to be rendered to the client, right? So what it does, basically this controller here, it returns model and view object. It returns model and view object here. Yes. So what is this model and view object? The name itself indicates model means the data here, I can say. Model means always the data, and the view means the component which is responsible for rendering the response, I can say. Yes. Here you'll find that sorry, in this model and view object, you'll have the response data as well as the details about the view component which is supposed to render the response. In the model and view object, you'll have the response data. Also, the details about the view component which is supposed to render the response here. Yes. So that is what you'll find in the model and view object. So dispatcher servlet will take that model and view object. Generally, you see the controllers will not be responsible for rendering the response. The controllers, what they do, they will take that, they will process the request and simply they'll return this model in the object which contains the response data. Who should render the response here? Which component is supposed to render the response? You see, the view component. And the view component details also will be in that model and view object. So dispatcher servlet will take this model and view object. It reads that view name. Okay. Yes. It reads that view name. And then it returns that, sorry, it will pass that view name to the view resolver. We have another component called as view resolver. We got another component here called as view resolver. So that view resolver, you'll find that it helps this dispatcher servlets to locate that view component. This view resolver, it helps the dispatcher servlet to locate the view component, I can say. Yes. So this dispatcher servlet will pass that view name to the view resolver. You see, view resolver is also one of the predefined components from the Spring framework. It is also one of the predefined components from the Spring framework here. Yes. So which helps the dispatcher servlet to resolve a view name to the view component here. Okay. Next, now the dispatcher servlet will take that view component details from that view resolver and simply it will call that view component, and it will also pass the response data which was provided by the controller to this view component here. Yes. So this is how a client's request is processed in Spring MVC. Okay. Yes. So which component is the main component here? The dispatcher servlet. Okay. So that is the main component. You see, this MVC flow, if you keenly observe this flow, you'll find that here you have clear separation of concerns, right? Yes. Dispatcher servlet, it will be intercepting that incoming request. Controllers will be processing that incoming request. Handler mappers helps the dispatcher servlet, you see. And also, you see, the model components, they contain the business logic and the data, applications data here. That is what you'll see in the model components. Yes. And the view component is supposed to render the response. So this is based on MEC itself. View components are there, controllers are there, model components are there. Dispatcher servlet and controller, they come under the controllers category. We have view components, and also you see we have model components. Yes. So we have separation of concerns. So this code, it looks better organized. Okay. Yes. So that is one of the advantages of using this MVC pattern. So Spring MVC framework is, it uses that MVC design pattern here. That is what you can observe. Okay. Yes. Fine. So now let's move on. Here, you see, having understood the flow, let's dig into more details of this flow and its components. You see, Spring moves the request between a dispatcher servlet, handler mappings, controllers, and view resolvers. The request is moved between the dispatcher servlet, handler mappers, controllers, and view resolvers. So that is what we have noticed now, right? So that is what we people have noticed. Yes. Here, you'll find that this dispatcher servlet is based on a design pattern called as front controller. The dispatcher servlet is based on a design pattern called as front controller. You say front controller. Front controller design pattern. A front controller is a common web application pattern where a single servlet delegates responsibility for a request to other components of an application to perform actual processing. That is what you'll see. Have you noticed it? What this front controller, the dispatcher servlet is doing, it is delegating that request processing to the other components here. Yes, right? So that is what it does. Yes. It's called as front controller because you see, it is the main component which will be intercepting the incoming requests. This component here, it is the main component which will be intercepting the request and delegating that to the rest of the components in the application. Yes. Okay. So remember, if someone asks you what are the patterns which are used in Spring Framework, you can say front controller, MVC, dependency injection is also a pattern itself. You know that, yes. So these are the various patterns which are used. Okay. Next. See, when a request is sent to MVC framework, you see, these are the following sequence of steps which will be executed here. Yes. What are they? First of all, the dispatcher servlet will receive the request. That is what we saw. Dispatcher servlet job is to send request to Spring MVC controller. So Spring MVC controller, you'll find that it is responsible for processing the request, as I told you people. Yes. You'll find that in an application, you may have several such Spring MVC components. Sorry, you'll have several such controllers in an application. You may have several such components here. Yes. So dispatcher select needs to find out which controller is supposed to handle that incoming request. So because you will have several such controllers, each controller will be responsible for processing a particular type of request. So it will take the help of handler mappings. Handler mapping pays particular attention to the URL carried by the request. Yes, when a client places a request, as part of that request, you'll have action URL definitely. So the request has been placed for which component? Yes. So you'll find that here, The handler mapper will read that request URL, action URL, and it will appropriately return that controller's reference which can handle that request. That is what it does. Okay. You see, the controller processes the request by calling the appropriate service methods and returns model view object. So these are all the things which I've discussed. Okay. Next, this is important. Yes, you look at this diagram first of all of you. Check this diagram once. So what happens here? This is Spring MVC application, right? So this is actually a Spring MVC based application. Definitely, you'll have a container here also. You'll have an application context. So far, we are working with one type of application context here. Now, find that we have another type of application context, which is called as web application context here. So we call it as web application context. And we'll have two application contexts. Yes, here in this case, you'll find that we have two application contexts here. Yes. One is called as servlet web application context. The other one is root web application context. So you'll find that one of the application context, web application context called as servlet application context, it will be associated to the dispatcher servlet. It will be associated to the dispatcher servlet, I can say. Yes. And in this web application context, servlet web application context, you'll have all the beans configured which are related to the web application, web MVC, I can say, web MVC components like controllers, view resolvers, handler mappers. So you'll have those components here in the servlet web application context. And you'll have another application context. You'll have another application context called as root web application context. So which will be loaded when the application loads into the memory, I can say. Okay, it will be loaded when the application starts. When the application starts, this web application context will be loaded, root web application context. So and in this root web application context, you'll have the details about the components which are other than MVC components. So when I say components other than MVC, so what you'll have, other than WebMVC components like service components, repositories, model components. Okay, so these are all the components which are non-web related. They're not web components. Okay, yes, that is what you'll find. You see, application context instances in Spring can be scoped, as I told you people, in the web MVC framework. So each dispatcher has its own web application context, and this web application context, you'll find that here it inherits all the beans already defined in root web application context here. You see, you'll find that whatever the components which you got in the root web application context, yes, they'll be available with the servlet web application context. So that is what you'll find here. Okay, now based on this discussion, so let's try to do one thing. We'll create a web application here using Spring MVC module. So first of all, I'll show you the legacy approach as I told you people using plain Spring framework. And then later on, I'll be introducing you people to Spring Boot, where we'll talk about the web applications development using Spring Boot. Okay. So first, I'll use this new Spring Legacy project option. So I'll provide the name. I'll call it as A Spring MVC Proj, and then you have to select the template. You can maximize this. You see, again, I have a problem displaying the template names here. See, you have to create a, you have to choose this template folder, Spring MVC Proj. You need to choose this template called as Spring MVC Proj. Here, this Spring MVC project template helps us to create the Spring MVC application. You click on next, click on next. So now I'll specify this project details, the packaging structure, com.mtc.app, and click on finish. Just wait for a while, so it will build the project here. Yeah, fine. Now let's inspect that form.xml file first of all. So see, this template is also based on a Maven tool itself, as I told you people. Yes. Now, first of all, let me change this project version to 4.3.11. Next, see, this is the dependency first you need to check for, you need to look for. Yes. So which is related to web MVC module. And then because you see this MVC is using servlets internally, so this library is related to that servlets also. They are added here. Yes, that is what you can notice. Okay. Yes. Next, first of all, I'll show you people this web.xml file. Where you'll find this dispatcher servlet configuration. You see, what is this highlighted code here? Can you people tell me?
Like for all the incoming requests, it should send it to dispatcher servlet. So we are defining the path for dispatcher servlet.
Yeah. So this is your dispatcher servlet configuration, I can say. What is this? You'll find the dispatcher servlet configuration here. So that is what you got. Yes. Here, you see, we have an initialization parameter also for this dispatcher select called as config context config application context config location, and it refers to this configuration file servlet context XML. As I told you people, for the dispatcher servlet we have an application context associated. We got an application context which is associated, right? So what does that application context mean? You see, it is actually sorry, servlet web application context, right? So this is the XML file which is related to that application context where you'll configure the web components, I can say. Okay, where you'll have the web components. Yes. Now here you'll find that there is another component which is configured called as a listener. Okay, so this is dispatcher select which will be configuring, which will be intercepting all the incoming requests. Next, we have a listener component, okay, called as context loader listener. So this listener component, you'll find that it is it is invoked. This listener's responsibility is to listen for an event. What is it? The application loading. As soon as the application loads, this listener will be invoked, and this listener will load that root web application context. So how? Through this configuration file. For the root web application context, you'll have that components configured in this XML file. You have the components which are configured in this XML file, I can say. Yes, root web application context. So that is loaded by this listener. And this listener will look for this context parameter where your Spring Bean configuration file is configuration file details are configured here. Yes. Okay. And actually you'll find that even we can avoid this XML file and configure that the dispatcher server purely in that configuration class itself. In the last class we saw the configuration class, right? Yes, it is possible to configure it in the configuration class itself. Yes, we can do that. Yes. Okay, next, now let's see a controller, how a controller looks like. One more thing before we move on, it's a web application. You see, we have web app folder. Under that, we have webin folder. You see, this is where you have the configuration files. One is servlet context, the other one is root context. Under the webin folder, you have classes folder, and you have views folder where you'll find your view components. What are the view components here? The JSPs. Okay. Next, we have this web.xml file. So these are the things which you'll find here. See, under the webin, you have views folder where you have this view component. May not be JSPs always. You can have other types of components also. Next, we have a controller here. If you can check this, yes. How a controller looks like. Let's see. Here, you see, when we talk about a controller, it's just a simple Java class, I can say, annotated with @controller annotation. Okay, yes, it is annotated with @controller annotation, I can say. Next thing here, let me just make some changes and then I'll explain it. Okay, I want to make some changes here. Just a minute. It's just a controller, sample controller, which is added by this template. You don't need to use it. Okay, it's not mandatory that you should use the sample controller. So just for a reference, it is given. So we'll try to understand how a controller looks like. That's it. And then I'll remove it. Okay, now let me explain this controller here. You see, to create a controller, you just need to define a class and annotate it with @controller annotation. That's what you need to do. Here, the next thing, the controller will be responsible for processing the client's request, right? So in the controller, you need to add a method which contains that request processing code. And one more thing here, this method, you can think of it as a kind of service method, do methods which we saw in servlets. In the servlet, you'll override a do get method or do post method to process the client's request. Okay, to write the request processing code, you'll do that, right? Here, you will find that this method which you got here, it's a user-defined method, which you can think of it as a service method where you will write the request processing code. So in this case, you see, what is the name which I gave? Process request. The name can be anything you wish. And have you noticed it? This method is annotated with this request mapping. You got some value. What is it? Get time. What is it? It's a URL which is configured for this method. I can say it's a URL which is configured for this method. Get time. So that means if a client wants to place a request for this method to process that client's request, you see this URL get time has to be used. And what is this method equal to request dot method? So it indicates that this method here, it handles HTTP method get request. It indicates that this method, it handles HTTP method get request. Okay. Yeah. It takes a locale object. So the client's locale, the language settings and all, it can read those details. It's not mandatory that it should take locale object. Okay. Yes. It's not mandatory. Fine. Next, you see this method returns a model in the object. As I told you people, you'll have that response data as well as that view component details, which is supposed to render the response. In this model and view object, you'll have those details. Yes. See, when this method is called, when a client places a request for this method will read the date details, server date and time. It formats it, okay, and then it will pass on the date to the dispatcher servlet through the model and view object, and this date will be displayed. The server date and time will be displayed here. That is what it happens here. Okay. Yes. You see, so that formatted date is in the string object. What is it? Formatted date. You got a variable reference variable which holds that string object reference where you got the date. Yes. You see, now that formatted date is the response data which has to be rendered to the client. To render this date to the client, you see, we have to return that formatted date to the dispatcher servlet. How will you return it? Through the model and view object. You see, this controller returns a model and creates a model and view object. You see, so this model and view class constructor, it will pass that view name, the JSP name which is supposed to render that view, that response data. Okay, it will pass that view name. See, this is just the name of JSP. Next, to this model and view object, the response data is added. So what is the response data? That the server date and time formatted data, as I told you people. Response data is added. You see, adding response data to model and view object. That is what you're doing here. Yes. Okay. Yes. Next, once that response data is added, you see this controller here, it returns that model and view object. That is what it does. So what happens when this model and view object is written here is the dispatcher service will take this model and view object. It reads that view name. So what is the view name? What did I say? What is the view name? What is the view name here?
Home.jsp.
Home. Just we have home. That's it. Okay. There's no JSP extension here. Home. Dispatcher select will read this view name, and you know what it does? It refers to the view resolver. Where is the view resolver? It's a predefined component, and you will find that it is configured in the servlet context XML file, which represents that servlet web application context. We have a view resolver here. This is the code for the view resolver. If you can check this, you see this view resolver has got two properties. It's a predefined bean class. I guess for the first time we're using a predefined bean class here. Internal resource view resolver. It's a Spring Bean class. It's a predefined bean class which is configured here, and it has got two properties, means two variables, prefix and suffix. And the prefix, for prefix we are assigning a value. It is like assigning a value to a variable. Okay, just think of it as assigning a value to the variable here. So that is what we are doing. Okay, yes. Here, you see, now this view resolver will take that view name. Dispatcher servlet will refer the view name to this view resolver, and view resolver will take this view name and it will prefix that view name. What is the view name? Home. It will prefix it with this webint views and will suffix it with .jsp. So which becomes the location of the JSP page. I can say it becomes the location of the JSP page. Yes. So it returns this JSP location to the dispatcher servlet. And dispatcher select will call that JSP and will pass the response data. So what is the response data here? Yes, can you people tell me? What is the response data here? What response we got here? See that server time, a string object. So you see, it's the name of the response data. Server time, you see, it's a name, and this is the object, string object. Yes, that is what you see. Okay, so now this JSP page will be invoked where it is under the weapons use. You saw that, right? Home JSP. So this JSP page will be invoked, and this JSP, it's just like a HTML page, okay, which will just read that response data. So what is it? The name of the response data is server time, right? You can just simply read it this way. It won't be that complicated for you. Don't worry. Didn't teach you people much the JSP part, but don't worry. So we are not using it much here. So that's the reason why you can just ignore it. But just you need to understand few things here. That should be more than enough. So we'll be developing the applications, web applications. There you'll come to know more about this JSPs. Okay. Yes. Because nowadays, actually, what is the purpose of web page? I'll tell you. Web pages are actually used to develop. Sorry, the JSPs are used to create web pages. JSPs are actually used to create web pages here. Okay. Yes. You will find that previously, yeah, JSPs were used a lot, but now we are not using JSPs much. So then, what is used here on the front end side? What is used a lot? If people got any idea, Angular, jQuery, yeah, HTML, JavaScript is used a lot. I can say JavaScript, which is available in different versions like jQuery, Angular, React.js. So these are used a lot. And from the server side, the response data is passed on to the client in the JSON format. Earlier, Java objects were used. Okay, so if it is a Java application, always we used to work with Java data, Java objects. But now that response data is transformed into JSON format. So JSPs, there are only few takers, not much, not many use this JSPs nowadays. That's the reason why you don't have to worry about it. Just for namesake, you learn this. Of course, you'll get a good idea of JSPs also here. So we'll use them how to read the data. I'll show you all such things. Yeah. Okay. So this JSPC, it can read that object. So that string object using this expression $of server time. That's it. We're done. So let's deploy this application on the server. Okay. Here, how will you place the request for this controllers method? What you will do? How will you call this controller's method? Client wants to invoke this controller's method. What it does? Yeah, this is the URL which is configured. Get time. Okay, get time is the URL. Get time. You see, I placed a request for that URL get time. So you got this response here. That's it. So who's displaying this response? The JSP page. So the JSP page is actually displaying the response here. That is what happens. Okay. So when you place the request initially, the controller will be called. The controller's method will be called. You see, we got some log information also which is invoked. When this process request method is called, we got some log information as well here. Yes. Yeah. And then the controller's method, you see, it reads that server time. It will process that format the date and time, and it creates a model and view object. You see, in the model and view object, you got that response date. Sorry, it is passing that view name. While creating this model and view object itself, it is passing that view name, and also you see, it is adding that response data to this model and view object, and simply returns that model and view object here. Yes, that is what it does. Okay, and dispatches alert will take that model and view object. It reads that view name and it refers it to that view resolver. What is the view resolver here? This is the view resolver. So that view resolver will prefix that view name home with webinfuse and it will suffix it with .jsp, which becomes the location of the JSP page. Okay, yeah, and it calls that JSP page. It will pass the response data. Yep. So I hope you people got this flow. So this is what we have implemented now. So is it clear for you people, all of you? Okay, good. No, actually, I'll show you people how to develop, uh, you know, a web application completely, which includes a web page, controllers, the backend repositories, which will be using Hibernate framework to interact with the database server. So we'll integrate Spring also here, sorry, Hibernate also, and we'll see. So what kind of support we got here in Spring framework for validations for everything. So we have to explore it. Okay? So we'll have three sessions for this to completely explore this MVC framework, and then we'll move on to the other modules. I'll talk about Spring Boot AOP module, first AOP and then Spring Boot, and then microservices. Okay, yeah, fine. So I'll stop it here, but just a minute before you move, before you leave. Um, I want to conduct a special class. So do you want it tomorrow or day after tomorrow? Let me know when you want the class. Tomorrow or day after tomorrow. In the evening itself, I'll conduct it. Um, when you want the class. Okay, I'll go for no majority. Means Saturday or Sunday. Tell me. Okay, just type in Saturday or Sunday. Saturday evening or Sunday evening. Okay. So if the class starts, it will be at 6:30 itself. 6:30 p.m. CST. I'll take the 2 3 hour session. Yes, it will be a long session. End after 3 hours. Saturday or Sunday. Majority. I'll go with majority. Just give me your opinion. Saturday or Sunday. Saturday evening or Sunday evening. What about others? Everyone. Saturday means yeah, tomorrow. Yes. Okay. I guess most of you people are opting for tomorrow. So I'll do one thing. So I'll conduct a class tomorrow evening at what time? I'll I'll start little early. Okay, not at this time. Let me start little early. Yeah. Spring MVC class at 6 p.m. Central Time. So which means for me, okay, this Saturday for you people, which means it is Sunday 5:30 p.m. Indian time. It will be for 2.5 to 3 hour session. Okay. Yes, where we'll be exploring the Spring MVC. I'll also show you people Spring Hibernate integration also. Okay. So this class is going to be important for you people to understand the Spring MVC. Yes. Okay. That's all. Thank you all. Bye bye. Yeah. I guess I've uploaded it another folder, but I didn't do it in your folder. Yeah, I'll do it. Yes, sure. I'll do it. Sorry. Yeah. Thank you all. Bye bye.